What's going on, guys? Okay, so today I wanted to recap PHVS and why I picked this one yesterday. So this one was trading, so basically I'd gapped up in pre-market on some news, very early in pre-market around 7 o'clock. So they announced their top line phase 2 data for one of their drugs, and their primary endpoint was met, and substantially reducing HAE attack symptoms, and as well as all secondary endpoints met, as well tolerated at all dose levels. So this was actually really good news, especially for phase 2. If it were like a phase 1, maybe I would have steered clear, but it was a phase 2, so and the data was very good. So this was definitely on high watch for us in the morning. And so now I'll go right into the chart because it had gotten a ton of volume pre-market in the morning. Pull that up. There's definitely a lot of volume coming in the morning, and especially at the open. If you look at how many shares were traded just at the open, it tried to break out there, and it just couldn't actually like get a full breakthrough. And then it had to kind of pull back and find some support. But this was a classic gap and go setup with zero borrow, so there's zero available shares to short. So that made it very bullish for me, especially obviously with the really good news of their phase 2 data that came out. Another key thing, obviously, this had gapped up in the morning, and it was holding, I would say, the top quarter of that gap up, right? It was holding like most of the gap up there. It had moved from 250, and it was holding around $4. Now that's really strong when you see that, especially when you see all this buying volume come in the morning. That got rejected, and it got shorted, and that kind of set us up for a really nice short squeeze. But basically, this had a ton of volume in the morning, and it had a record volume, I would say, record volume in the morning, even before this spike happened. Um, if you just go back and look at his chart, it had been beat down for a really long time and hadn't got a ton of volume at all. And then all of a sudden on this day, super beat down chart, it's getting record volume. I think when we were looking at this, it was after these candles, so it was definitely around like 20 million shares traded. And so that was huge for this stock that had not been touched in a long time. And that's what I try and look for, is those big day trades, the stocks that gap up and they have incredible amounts of volume. And then the other good thing about it is it was zero borrow, so shorts couldn't really short it much. And if they did, they'd probably get squeezed anyways. And that's basically what happened, and why it halted up multiple times is because shorts were covering their shares and buying back their shares, and that just caused a massive short squeeze. But if we're looking at the 10-minute chart, you could have easily traded the breakout here. Again, it was holding that top quarter of the gap. Very strong action in the morning. It didn't even pull back very much, right? It was holding this moving average level and curling above the moving averages. And then we can see um, our 8-day moving average crosses over the longer time frames, and that's when we start to get the breakout. We also got a 10-minute bullish PSAR signal here coming through and pushing this up. So this was able to hold $4, and that was really a key level. You can just see how strong it was in the morning and how much volume it got in the morning. So it's definitely on high watch for us, and the fact that, again, like, it hadn't been touched in a really long time and hadn't gotten this much volume. When we were looking at this, is around 20 million shares traded right in the morning, and that was around 420 or 430, around that price zone. And then, it just started to get a ton of volume, and it just started halting up because it was squeezing a bunch of shorts. But this is an incredible setup just because it had gotten a record volume right in the morning, right? And then you could see, going back, we'll just search this up. I use shortablestocks.com. I just quickly check this in the mornings for 3 to 4 gap up setups that I like, that have good news. Of course, PHVS had really good news, so if it were to get volume, it would squeeze up, and that was my thesis behind it. But this has actually been zero boro for a while. Let's see what's wrong here. We're frozen. I don't know why the data's not coming up, but it'll show you. Basically, it said zero boro when I found this stock in the morning yesterday. I think it's because I'm not signed in. That's why it's not showing me all the data. But yeah, so this was zero boro, and it had the chance to really squeeze up because it had got that record volume. And you can just even look at the weekly, how beat down this was. So it really did have a chance to explode through and make a massive move because, just think of all the shorts that needed to cover, the shorts that had shorted this down the entire way that needed to cover, and then think of all the buyers that would come in knowing that it's zero boro, right? So like everything was basically perfect for this one, and the news just rocketed this thing. Like obviously the news is very important because it's phase 2 data, and they saw really good results with their drug. So yeah, this was just an incredible move. I of course sold too soon. I think I sold around like 6:30, and then it just ran to $12. It's gonna happen sometimes, but like that's a really nice gain anyways. So yeah, I'm really happy with this trade. You can see again in the morning on the 15-minute. Look at all that volume that came in. Those two candles, ton of volume in the morning, and then you can see it proceeds to actually hold up on the 15-minute. The 15-minute PSAR, it continues to stay green, bullish through this trend, and then we saw a breakout with some volume. And again, the 10-minute, you can see the bears were in control here, and then it turns bullish right here, and that could be an entry for you, right? Like once you see some volume come in, you've got good news, you've got zero boro, and you see that 10-minute bullish PSAR signal, and then you also see the price riding above the 8-day moving average. That can be a really bullish sign. Obviously, volume is really important, and the volume really came in on this one. And then you can obviously see all the volume that came in right in the morning, and that was a signal for us to continue watching this stock. Okay, and then I'm going to also review BXRX today. This is a good one that I initially called out. I think it was around 480 around here in after hours yesterday, and then it ran to 729. So we played a little gain there. Bit of a riskier trade there. And I did like this trade down here because it had been pretty beat down in the morning and it was finding some supports. So we could look at the 5-minute here. You can see we had a 5-minute bullish PSAR signal coming through, and we had zero boro as well. And I knew that shorts had shorted that spike here and the spike here as well, and they were looking to cover at some point. So I think that's what this spike was. And this was again a zero boro name that had come on my radar, and I basically started looking at this and said, if it gets volume, I think it could squeeze up pretty hard, and it did. So you definitely want to keep a lookout for these like incredibly high volume names that have zero boro on them, because they can really squeeze hard, and bulls can be in full control if the volume comes in. But this one was a reverse split name. You can see now it's back down, and now it's it's losing strength. But we really just played this pop here, and that was a really sick gain. Is around 25% gain there. And so yeah, but you can look at all the volume that came in yesterday. Well, more volume today, but historical volume yesterday, right? This big volume that came in on this one. And so this one was on radar just because, again, zero boro had a ton of volume, and we knew that there were shorts that were shorting the spikes here, and so they needed to cover. They're still in control though, but definitely have to watch this one for continuation. Yeah, so that's basically it. I mean, a lot of it is just like scanning for volume, and usually high relative volume. This one had, on this day here, it had 21 times its average volume. So that was a record amount of volume for this stock, and so of course we were watching it very closely. And there's a pretty easy way of doing this, of just finding these stocks. I personally, I like to use just a simple gap scanner. So I'll just come to gappers, and then also you can use trade ideas to do this as well. Um, and I'll just sort by volume and find a chart that I like that has really good volume, and then I will proceed to kind of look at those different variables that could help this thing run, right, or help a certain stock run. A lot of the times it's record volume is the most important thing. BXRX, you can see all that volume that came in, right? So yeah, it's a simple gap scanner. Another way you can do it is just come to like a simple FinViz screen, um, and then go to all, relative volume, you can say over 10, and then sort by float. And you can see obviously BXRX is there. I like to see like relative volume above 10 or 20. A lot of these have already started moving, but sometimes you'll find some stocks that haven't started moving, and those are the ones to watch that get all that volume. PRFX. So that's another way to do it. SQL, it's really thin. But yeah, I prefer record volume, record levels. This one's interesting for sure. I mean, look at that volume bar. Um, the issue here is, it's a 45-cent stock. There's only 1 million shares traded here. So that's not really a lot of dollar volume. So dollar volume is important too. But wow, I'm surprised how much this is able to move on such low volume. But yeah, that's one of the ways you can do it. That's how I found BXRX. I just sorted for relative volume above 10 and then sorted by float. These can be riskier plays if there's no news. So I would highly recommend, I would just day trade news and gap up plays, like gap and goes is what I usually stick to, but this can be another way of finding them. And I still think this stock could have a lot bigger move at some point. So it's definitely still on watch. But if you look at all the volume that came in, right, like that's record volume, so it's definitely going to be on watch. And it's been beat down for a really long time as well. So yeah, I'm going to end it there though. All right, guys, take care.